order the June 26, 2000 meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee. This meeting is being held in the Triton High School Library at 7 p.m. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. To begin the meeting, I will read the district vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We inadvertently left the chairperson's comments off of the agenda tonight, but well, I was just going to defer to you to Deb for a second to talk about the
just for a second
gathering.
I collected data from not 100% of the people, but most, and so there is not one date where everybody's going to be able to come to our cookout. So we're going to have August 4th as the primary date and August 11th as a rain date. And I'll send out an email. It's called Perfect Potluck. I've used it before with moderate success, and that will allow you to sign up for whatever it is that you'd like to bring. And this is a family-friendly event.
All right. Moving on to the consent agenda, I'll read aloud the donations. A check in the amount of $1,500 from the Pine Grove School PTA to purchase Chromebooks. A check in the amount of $1,200 from the Salisbury Elementary School PTA to purchase Chromebooks to be used for technology in the grade 6 classroom. A check in the amount of $2,500 from the Salisbury Elementary School PTA to be used toward continuing the upgrade, replacing of the existing playground for the early childhood program at Salisbury Elementary School. If I can have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to hold one item.
Which one?
The June 19th meeting minutes from the Finance Committee.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'm going to hold all of item B, section B, under the consent agenda so that we're holding that entire item. All right. We have a motion to approve. So as amended, all in favor? All right. You've got unanimous approval, and we'll come back to that during subcommittee reports.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Welcome to summer. We have no student advisory report. They're hopefully off having fun. Any new business? All right. Being done, I'll move on to the District Communications Committee under Reports and Deliberations. So there were 2 meetings of note that were held recently. One of them was the actual District Communications Committee itself, which was held on May 23rd, 2019. The notes are in your packet from that meeting, but while there was extensive conversation about a number of different pieces, I think the biggest thing for me was that the DCC has agreed to potentially move forward toward looking at amending the regional agreement in the spring of 2020. And we established a meeting schedule that you'll see in the agenda for September, October, and November to potentially look at all of the different pieces that could be included in that amendment. So we've been working toward this for a really long time. I don't think this will include everything that we've worked on. I can probably confidently say it will not. But I think it's a big step forward to at least get some of what we've talked about and have come to agreement on over the last 7 years. Am I good in saying that, Dina? At least to the point where we're bringing it to a town meeting. So that'll be going on through the fall. I hope you'll make every effort to attend those DCC meetings because I think they're going to be instrumental in deciding what gets included, what doesn't, and where things are set aside and on a semi-permanent basis, and what is kind kind of continued, not through that vote, but as an ongoing conversation beyond that vote. At that meeting, we also had discussion about meeting with our state legislators following a letter that was received by the boards of selectmen and the school committee from Senator Tarr. Senator Tarr's office had given me a couple of dates at that meeting. Unfortunately, those dates did not end up working out for the senator, but they, in working with his office, they were able to provide a meeting date of June 19th. That was held here. A number of our actually, all of our legislators ended up attending that. It was a lengthy meeting. I want to say we were here for 2.5 hours, maybe. Lots of discussion on that. Policy and advocacy, I think, is going to handle kind of a piece of this later in their, from their meeting earlier today. So I'm going to let Linda summarize a lot of that later. But I think the big things I picked up from them was that there is a strong belief that the one or more or some amalgamation of the education reform bills will be going through this year, or at least taken up by the legislators on the floor, which is not necessarily, what's happened in the past. They haven't come to some sort of a compromise or middle ground to try and move something forward. There does definitely seem to be the action to do that. The question is going to be what's included in that and how can we influence that moving forward. So we'll continue working closely with our legislators' offices, and Linda will update that at the end of the agenda. Any discussion on the district communication meeting or the legislative meeting that was held here? All right, seeing none, I will move on to the MASC Summer Institute and MASC MASS Joint Conference. This is item B under reports and deliberations. So I don't know if the new members would have received them, but there was a packet. I didn't bring the Summer Institute one, but this was the one for the fall conference. You may have received this in the mail. You may have also received email updates on these two meetings. The summer conference topic is equity. I don't know, I'll put it out there and say, is anyone intending to attend that 2-day session? You can either attend both days or one day or the other day. I believe it's Friday and Saturday, if I remember correctly. All right, I didn't see a lot of interest for us there either, so. And then in the fall, so there's an early bird registration for the fall conference, which we've typically had people attend. That's due by, I think I want to say it's July 15th. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So, so ideally, anyone that's going, we would like to get them in under that early bird special. If you intend to, if you could let Patty know, ideally, a week short of that, maybe by the 7th or 8th, then that would be terrific. And I would recommend that we not do it today, but we do need a delegate to the resolutions conference that happens in the middle of the MASC conference. That person is not due until, I believe, the 18th of October. So my recommendation would be to hold that until one of our fall meetings and make a decision then when we have a better idea of who will be attending, what days they'll be attending, and where availability might be for someone to serve as a delegate for that.
I think we had that on the recurring October.
I believe so as well.
But if it
I think
needs-
it's October 18th, so I think it needs to go on September, but my recommendation would be to hold that unless there are any objections. Okay, and if you need information, let me know. I have this packet, and I have another packet, and I have a bunch of emails, and you can also find information on the MASC website if you're trying to make a decision about when to go. You do not have to do the entire conference. People have done, whatever, Friday, Saturday. They've done Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the entire thing. So there's a lot of flexibility there. There does tend to be some really good information. I know last year we were able to bring back information on evaluations, on social emotional learning. We were able to bring back information that was very timely as far as the deadlines to get vaping and tobacco regulations in locally to limit the sale age and work with our towns to get that in place prior to the moratorium on putting those local health regulations through. So things like that are very important in coming out of this conference. All right. Moving on to the item C under reports and deliberations, the school committee goals, progress update, and overall evaluation. So I will put put it out there to go around the table. I know that Erin has been storing up her long list of every place she's been for the last month and a half. So this is just as by way of background, this is school committee goal number 2 was for each of the school committee members to attend at least 3 outside of the school committee, meetings, events in the district or in our communities, and report back to the school committee on those. This was an effort to kind of broaden our outreach and make sure that the school committee is well connected with the communities that we serve. Traditionally, we do go around the table and list the events that we were at. So I'll start with Mr. Lees, since he's on the end today.
I don't have anything to share at this time.
All right. That's okay. I think Erin's going to accommodate for both. No, you forgot your list?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
So I tie-dyed the
Bring it
first.
a little closer
Closer?
together.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I helped tie-dye the first, third, fourth, and fifth grade T-shirts for field day. I attended the Kindness Rocks event and the book fairs at SES, as well as the ice cream social, and I helped with the popcorn fundraiser and participated in the Orange Ball.
Well done. Linda?
I went to the Salisbury Elementary graduation or recognition. The one question that I do have is with the outreach of us going to these different things, not so much if you're volunteering with the PTA and all that, but being recognized at some of these events, that you're not being, like even at the middle school, they recognize the school committee's hair. But I think just so that people know that the school committee is going to these events, that we are recognized as being there. Because I shook Mr. M's hand and he never mentioned me once.
That's at the 6th grade recognition?
As well as the middle school too,
Yes, you should be. I will.
yeah. So just so that if we're doing an outreach, like a lot of people don't know, they might know our name but not know your face, at least this way it gives them a way of knowing your face as well.
Yeah, certainly, ceremonies and things like that are workable. Other events, if you're in
Right.
volunteering, then that's
Right,
different.
absolutely,
but
that's what
for
I'm
the-
saying, it's
absolutely.
different than that, but, so, that's it.
All right. Paul? Can you grab a mic? Sorry.
Went to the legislative roundtable last week, but we'll be hearing a lot about that later, I think.
Deb?
This isn't, I'm mentioning this because I think it's important, even though it's not really a school thing, is to go to the seniors, the Council on Aging had a carnival. Yeah, and just for them, it wasn't, there were no children, but just for them, and so I was at that, and I don't expect to be announced, but I can make that announcement myself.
Well, and it's good to know what's going on in our community because, those are worthwhile things. So, Maureen?
I went to NES to help in the art room. The sixth graders for years have been doing an monster project, which they make this little monster character, and then it's displayed at graduation. I helped last year, and so I was asked if I would help again this year. But this year, I brought my 2 boys who graduated from NES years ago, and they still have their monsters. So they brought their monsters back to show the current 6th graders, and it was just fun because they had a lot of questions for my boys about Triton High School, Triton Middle School, and so it was a neat thing to do. So.
That's awesome. All right. So, I was going to go ahead, Dina.
Oh,
sorry.
I have nothing, but can I
Nothing,
just,
okay, go
can I just add on to the monsters? I just want to tell you, my kids are 26 and 28. We still have them. One is in the bedroom, one is in the attic, but we still have them. Those are something they will not give up.
Long-lasting projects. So I attended the Kindness Rocks event. I went to the Top 10% dinner, which is always an interesting event. If anyone here has never been to that, I would highly recommend it if you can make it. It's quite an interesting event in that the top 10% honorees actually invite someone to speak for them. It tends to be part celebration and part roast, which is always interesting. But it's a very lighthearted night, and it's a great way to recognize those students' accomplishments, not just academically, but very often the folks that opt to speak for them, recognize them as people for the great things that they do, because a lot of them are extremely involved service-wise. Are involved in their communities. It goes well beyond academically, and you get a good flavor for who those students are from their families as well, because a lot of times those teachers reach out right back to the families to get that information. So that's a great event. I went to the senior awards ceremony that was here, and I spent significant time at Pine Grove during the last week of school as they realized that they needed to pack massive amounts of books for the renovation. So that was an interesting thing. It was great because there were students that were willing to pitch in and help, came right out of the classroom, and spent time helping put the library and pack that up. Spent time taking the reading interventionist book room and packing all that up. And it was just many hands make light work, and it was a kind of a great thing to have parents and community members and teachers and students all pitching in together to do something along that side. So, all right.
Can I add one
Yeah.
other thing to say? Now that you've mentioned the high school award ceremony,
Yeah.
I noticed, and I was very happy to see this, that for the first time in probably several years, the recipients of the awards were really diverse. It didn't all go to the honor students or to the top 10%. I saw a lot of students who, you can tell they don't have the ropes or the sashes, any of that are just middle-of-the-road kids who applied for these scholarships and got them. And I don't know if that is the work of our guidance department that kind of said to these kids, you know what, you should be applying. I just don't want kids to think that it's just the smart kids that get these scholarships, that anybody can, if you're eligible for them, they should be applying. And I was really happy to see that this year.
So I would agree with you, and I would say, to give credit, the guidance department does an amazing amount of work with the scholarship committees, but also depending on the scholarship, there are folks from those scholarship, the trust or whatever, that are involved. But it is a lot of work, and should note Rebecca Pisowitz, who is the administrative assistant up there for that week of that ceremony, along with Megan Ober and the rest of the counselors as well, do yeoman's work. But Ms. Pisowitz, who was standing behind there with
Right.
sneakers on, is the mastermind behind that and does amazing stuff.
Well, I mean, I realize that each scholarship has its own selection committee, but I think kudos to the guidance department, exactly, who just, I'm sure they said to these kids, apply, you have nothing to lose. You write an essay, I mean, that's small price to pay for, even if it pays for a book. Believe me, after 2 kids in college, ooh, that helps.
All right, moving on. Item D, monthly report of the superintendent of schools.
So keeping on the
I just note too, it's 7:20.
duly noted.
Not to rush you through.
Throwing
I'm
down
just
tonight.
taking credit for having moved to item 7D.
And the fact that
20
Brian
minutes.
hasn't said a word, and it's 7:20. So, keeping on the end of year theme, you have my kind of abnormal or out of the ordinary schedule items, but the end of the year was very smooth, and we will say anyone who works within the schools is so appreciative of a June 14th ending, because it is unbelievable how much those additional 2 weeks within the month of June before you get past the 4th of July, because everyone knows once you go past the 4th of July, it's just a downward slope to September. So it was a very smooth ending of the year. I included, there were several folks that asked if I would provide my graduation remarks. Every year it's always interesting to see who is interested in what I said. This year it was grandparents. Certainly students and parents who said, thanks, that was great, that was helpful, nice and concise. But I literally had 5 grandparents stop me on that day in 2 requests, one through Patty and one directly, who requested I send them the remarks. So not sure the words of that generation, but certainly it struck a chord. So hopefully the graduates heard those words as well. As we've done in the past, and I think it's important that we continue to do, we certainly have a list of all of the places students will be attending. The class of 2019 will be attending come September. But I think it's probably more important that we publish the list of all of the institutions, 2- and 4-year institutions where students are accepted. We all know that there are myriad reasons and factors that go into the institution, the college, the the school that a student, and probably more accurately, the family chooses, financial implications being one of the strongest factors. But you can see the list of colleges, double columns, spans over the 2.5 pages. And it's an impressive list of institutions where our students were accepted. That means they passed the rigor, they passed all of the acceptance requirements. Certainly some on that list have much higher and more restrictive entry requirements. But I think that's a really important list that we publish every year to show the work of our students, teachers, families, because I think it is an important indicator that we as a community hold for life after Triton. And I think there's certainly, we've said this often, we've moved a little bit towards saying that every student should go to college, because there are certainly instances and students who are choosing a path that doesn't make sense for them. But every student who is capable, engaged, and invested in doing that, we need to find a way to get them there. So that's a list certainly to celebrate. In regards to Alice, I've been keeping up to date all throughout the year. In June, we did hold our first drill school-wide at every school. It was on June 3rd or 4th over the 5 schools. That was done very limited. It did involve students. Obviously, what happened in a K-2 classroom or at Pine Grove or Salisbury versus what happened with seniors here on this campus was very different in the way that we talked and worked with students, and then the way the drill actually functioned. The focus was on barricade, the simplest of the 3 components that we'll train through. The focus now, as we move to next year, will be to train on the counter and the evacuation portion of those protocols, and then move to more dynamic drills. Again, I'm going to say it again, over and over again. Parents, family, community will always be notified, always be notified well in advance of a drill. We will always note that it's a drill, and we will never, ever. There's actually some research that just come out in the past couple of weeks about training through fear. There is no research that says someone armed with an airsoft or some other kind of mocking or mimicking armed intruder or active shooter does anything but instill fear in folks. It does nothing to actually train. So we'll continue to train. The drills will get more dynamic, but they will never involve guns or toy guns or play guns or shock and awe, and it will always be notification. So I'm pleased where we are in that process, and look forward to just advancing our skills as we move forward in the coming years. But in regards to the fiscal 20 budget, I'm very happy to say at this point in the year, we're not laying off. We're not spending the months of June and July figuring out all the layoffs and the ripple effects from that. We are making some hires. Obviously, there were some positions within the budget through the BRIGHT program, the ASD program. There were also several retirees. Again, just to note, they joined us here at the beginning of June, but just to note that our retirees, a dozen of them have a collective 232 years of service to the district. So I don't think we can say that enough and thank them enough for their service. So we are well underway. I would say the majority of the hires seem to be done and in, and we're working through that process so everyone's ready to go for September 3rd. And the last thing, student handbooks. Last year, our process was not ideal. We conducted a legal review to make sure that all of the policies and procedures and everything that needed to be in our handbooks were in our handbooks. In the end, the format and flow didn't work. So I've been working, actually Katie Lakey and I have been working to revamp the format, chunk it into, getting to school within the classroom so that it flows more logically. I've actually used Narissa and Dina, I just sent it to them yesterday, two who were very vocal in that revamp process, because I can't have a consensus yet, or quorum, just for some feedback to see if this is the right approach. We'll revamp the rest of them, bring them to you later in the summer, in August, for approval for all the schools. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. 7:26, just going to note that. 6 minutes.
Wow, and how many items did I cover? Questions for the superintendent? All right, seeing none, we will move along. We're moving on to item 8, general action items, updated history and social sciences standards implementation.
Yes, I'm going to invite Anna Bates up to the table. So just to note, given the fact that we're here at the end of June, it conflicted with already existing plans for both Dave and Kim Croto, so that's why they're not here this evening. But Anna is here, actually facilitated the majority of the work, so Kim would likely be sitting next to her and Anna would be speaking anyway. But I'm going to hand the microphone over to Anna to give you an update on where we're at.
All right, thank you. So you have 2 pages in your packet. One of them is an overview of the work that has been done up to this point, and on the reverse, you'll see some proposed work for next year, and then also a formal recommendation letter for the adoption of a McGraw-Hill resource to support the 8th grade civics curriculum. We began this work probably a year ago, January, when the draft standards came out. So and up to this point, it's really been about professional development. I went with a group of teachers to a state-sponsored Civics Institute last summer. We have a high school teacher who's participating in a cross-district curriculum development initiative. And we have a number of high school teachers who have been participating in independent studies and just working on deepening their understanding of these. I also worked with the social studies and history teachers, grades 7 through 12, a number of different times, really to kind of unpack that framework, have a good understanding of not only what the standards are saying, but what the vision is. And then we use that to develop our own vision of what we wanted history and social science education to look like at Triton, grades 7 through 12. Given that vision, we were able to start making some decisions. There was a proposal from the high school teachers about a revised course sequence, which will align with the new standards. And then I worked with the 8th grade teachers as well as the assistant principal and reading specialists to begin reviewing curriculum materials. We had presentations from two different publishers and unanimously agreed on the McGraw-Hill resource, which is at this point the only Massachusetts-aligned resource, and it's, from what I've heard, is ubiquitous now. Everybody's sort of going with this one in Massachusetts. So we're proposing to begin implementation of that in the fall. The next steps will be, it will almost be like repeating the process that was done with the secondary teachers, but with the elementary teachers as well. I am going to be scheduling meetings in the beginning of the school year to present to each of the elementary schools an overview of the framework, recruiting a representative group to sort of deepen their understanding of the framework and then begin making some decisions about where do we need to go to make sure that with the work we're doing here is aligned with that framework, K through 12. Does anyone have any questions?
Ready? Can I just ask you to give like a 40,000-foot view of what's in the curriculum? Because I looked it up online, but I guess to a novice that's looking from the outside in, it's really hard to kind of understand the high points because they seem to list everything as the high point of the.
Are you speaking about the sort of the content and the standards,
Yeah,
or about the
McGraw-Hill. So,
McGraw-Hill.
Where are the big, where are the big changes that we're going to see coming in with this? Where's, what's new? What's changing?
Okay, so a number of things. The first and foremost, the content is changing from a world history to a civics focus. There's a focus on civics sort of K through 12 within the framework, but this is the year that they're really targeting. There is, within this framework, there are social studies practices similar to what they have for science practices and mathematics practices, where it's not just about the content anymore, but they're really asking students to engage in the work of social scientists. The actual instructional materials are very different. The teachers have decided to go entirely online. So they'll have Chromebooks. Each teacher will have one set of Chromebooks for their classes. Every student will have a license allowing them to access these materials. Anytime they have access to Wi-Fi, they can download those materials. They can download them on smartphones, and then they can read on the bus. They can sort of, if they don't have access at home, we can still get them those materials. I think in terms of curriculum materials, there are a lot of things that you can do with online resources that you can't otherwise. There are There's a program called Learn Smart, or a platform called Learn Smart, which is part of this, which provides immediate feedback to students. So if they're reading a passage, they answer a couple questions. If they answer incorrectly, the text will actually highlight the areas that they need to focus on. A student can elect to change the Lexile level of their own text down 2 to 3 grade levels so that they're better able to access that content. And I think until we really get our hands on these, this may just be the tip of the iceberg. I'm very excited about these changes, but I think we're going to learn that there's a lot more that we can do with an online program too.
My second question was going to be cost, but can you also, since you mentioned this being entirely online, also comment on Chromebook availability for this and whether we have sufficient resources?
We do have sufficient resources for this. So we have a split the cost over a 2-year payment plan, and that allowed us to lease Chromebook carts that will be used exclusively for those classrooms.
This was an existing lines
Yeah.
from previous adoption.
Okay, that was pulled
Yep.
over into
So
this.
it's not
Okay.
added, it was within Kim's budget.
Okay. Oh, Deb's got a question.
I didn't have a question until you just said something. You said that even students who, you said they would be able to download it onto phones and everywhere, and if they don't have Wi-Fi at home, you said they could access it, how?
So if they have their own device, if they have a phone, they can download it when they're in the school, and then they can access it even when they're at home. If they don't have that, it's very similar to our science program, which is also online at the middle school, where teachers can print any PDFs of any of the materials, whether it's text that they're reading. So if a student doesn't have the ability to use some of the things in this online platform, like highlighting tools, that they'll actually be able to print it and then do this sort of old-fashioned highlighting with it. So nobody will be denied access because they don't have an internet connection or a device.
Linda?
Question, but if you take it online, it highlights the area that you got wrong. How would those students that don't have that access benefit from getting that information?
So they'll be benefiting from that during the classwork too. So my understanding is, and that's a reason for getting the Chromebooks, is that they're going to be interacting with this platform, not necessarily with the text, but with the platform on a daily basis. So they'll have the benefit of that within the classroom.
So it sounded like the question, it sounded like you were saying, like they're assessing?
No, she said that they read a passage and then they answer questions at the end. And any of the questions that they got wrong, that program highlights the area that they got
Gotcha.
wrong. So I think these children are going to be missing out on if they do any of that work at home. Like if they have, are they going to have to do homework at home?
I would have to defer to the middle school teachers for that. I don't know the amount of homework. I do know that they do a lot of the work, and even a lot of the project work occurs in the classes. I don't know what the homework looks
'Cause
like.
my concern is those children that don't have access to this are going to be missing, like, getting the help online that they're being required to have.
Yeah, we would have to make sure that however we implement this, it's implemented universally. So that if there is something like questions being answered that are highlighted, that those are done in the class where we're saying there's enough Chromebooks. And if it's homework, it's print something off and do your highlighting. We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Right, exactly.
Yep,
That's-
absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments?
Social studies, you want to get Ann excited. This is her. This is
Well,
her
I just want
passion.
to comment that I want to thank the teachers for all this work. I know that you don't get much time to look at it, and that on top of a new science program, a new math program, so I commend everything that you do to try and get Triton up to where we need to be.
Said. So this is a formal action because this is an adoption of a curriculum, so.
So can I get a motion to approve the adoption of the McGraw-Hill Civics curriculum for grade 8 to be implemented in September 2019?
So moved?
Any further discussion? All in favor? We have unanimous approval. Thank you, Anna, and thank you to the team for
Anna.
working on this. All right, moving on to the,
Can I add one more thing, just as we're speaking into these microphones for my report? So I had alerted you that we were getting new equipment, new cable money. So Newbury has committed to the 75,000. It ended up being, we had said 80 to 90,000. It's in that ballpark. That 75,000 from Newbury was kind of a haphazard number that happened at the town meeting. they've committed to, the equipment's all ordered, they're committing to paying their 75, actually working with Lance from Salisbury Community TV. He's bringing it to the board later this week to pay for the balance of that, all new microphones, all new cameras, all new opportunities so that we can stream live, not stream, we could cable cast a signal to Comcast from this location, from the auditorium, and from the gymnasium. The stadium is a whole other ball of wax working on that. But whether the town picks that up to be able to broadcast that live, that's out of our hands, but we're going to be set up. We should be ready to go for a September meeting.
I have a question. So this isn't going to fix the graduation issues we had?
Which graduation issues?
Where the microphones weren't working?
Oh, yes, that was pure, literally, in talking to Bob after, can't figure out why. Just pure bug.
This new money is not going to.
This has
fix-
nothing to do with the stadium, no.
But it will address the microphone issues that have taken place in the gymnasium, correct?
Not this, so that's a separate,
Oh.
so remember the scoreboard? Remember there's a scoreboard that should also be in?
Yeah.
By August, middle of August? I haven't heard an update on that. Should be early August. That includes, with the two scoreboards, that includes a big, basically think of like a big Bose speaker, an 8-foot Bose speaker at that opposite end. That will fix the gymnasium. Any ceremony that happens in the gymnasium.
Oh,
with
okay.
feedback and all that, yes.
That's part of the scoreboard project.
It's a score, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing that's happening with this for the gymnasium is a connection where Patrick narrates, what do you do to a game? Announce the game?
Call a game.
Call a game, thank
Yeah.
you. Big fan of callers.
Narrates the game.
Is a live connection, so those games can be broadcast live. So that's the only change that happened in the gym.
Okay.
Same thing for here and same thing for the auditorium.
Any further questions for the superintendent? Tacking that onto your time, just so you know. All right. Moving on to the evaluation of the superintendent of schools for the 2018-2019 year. So a little bit of background on this. So this was the first time we had moved to this new process using an online survey tool that was truly outside of what the district had. In the past, we had this basic form that was very much based on the evaluation rubric. So this was quite different for us. So this is my personal opinion. There's information that's useful to us and information that's useful to Brian as the superintendent in the evaluation. And then there's the information that we have to submit to the state. This evaluation is very much, I believe, around what's useful to us and what's useful to Brian, less so about what we had to submit to the state. So you have, as part of your information that you received tonight and had received electronically earlier in the week, this summary of all of the actual survey data. Brian and I met to try and take that data and somehow coalesce it into what we have to submit to the state. So as part of your packet, you'll have the actual survey summary in there. You're going to have the superintendent rubric that's there, and then you're also going to have this summative evaluation kind of worksheet that we worked on. We don't have to report those top 3 goal ratings to the state. Those are literally just our internal kind of feedback on, has Brian met the goals that he set out in front of him to do?
Factored into
to complete.
that
Yes.
overall rating.
It should be factored into the overall rating. We met earlier this week to look at those performance standards and the overall rating that you'll see at the bottom of the of that main worksheet. What we ended up doing was going through all of the questions that were in the actual survey and trying to match those against the standards. So we literally look at a question and say, okay, well, this seems to apply to standards 1, 3, and 4. This seems to apply to standard 2. This seems to apply to standard 1 and 4. We came up with the ratings that you'll see there: standard 1 exemplary, standard 2 proficient, standard 3 exemplary, standard 4 proficient, and an overall rating of proficient. I'm bringing this back to you tonight because Brian and I came to I wouldn't call it a disagreement, but kind of 2 different viewpoints on the same issue. So for standard 1, which is instructional leadership, what you're going to see is what I believe should be his rating on there, which is a rating of exemplary based on what was in the survey. Brian looked at instructional leadership as his leadership for all the staff in the district. I tended to look at instructional leadership as his leadership to the leadership team, which is the group that I believe he directly affects. If you look at the rubric, it's kind of split between the two, but to my thinking, his greatest effect is going to be on that leadership team and then inspiring that leadership team to roll it down. But he doesn't necessarily control what's going to a kindergarten teacher at one of the elementary schools. He doesn't necessarily control what's going to what's happening with a history teacher at the high school. So I'm bringing this in front of you in part to look specifically at that item and in part to look at the overall rating here. Based on all of the results, Brian believes that his rating in Standard 1 should be proficient. I was specifically looking at items 25, 26, and 30, which I believe, given that they're so heavily rated by the committee members towards the always exhibits, puts him into the exemplary for Standard 1. So in that this is a committee decision, I will open this for discussion on both Standard 1 and any of the other items as well. I know that it's a much more complex process than we've gone through in the past. This is just what we need to report to the state. I consider what we're getting out of this and what Brian's getting out of this much more important than what's here, but I want to have an accurate representation in what goes to the state of our opinion of Brian's performance this year. Deb?
When you went through all of the answers to determine what the answer was going to be, what did that come out? Did that come out proficient or exemplary?
It depends on what you weigh against those standards, because there were situations where Brian said, I don't think this applies to Standard 1, and I said, I do. He was in very many cases, I will say, there were situations where I said, I think this is instructional leadership, and he said it's professional culture, or vice versa, because that wasn't predetermined in this process. This was something that we were doing after the fact. We were taking the data that's truly useful and trying to put it into this preset set of standards.
I understand that. So you're saying that there was no way you could take our input collectively, our input, and come up with proficient or exemplary. You couldn't do that.
No, because the questions aren't aligned to the standards.
Right,
So our
I
old
know that.
process, basically, you rated me on each standard based on the looking at the rubric. So this is why this was a pilot, because it's a great tool, provides me great feedback as far as the comments are helpful, constructive criticism. It's about how I function as a leader. But as Narissa was saying, it doesn't align to the 4 standards directly. So this piece is just to check the box for the state. Even it's no more subjective than it ever was. The survey makes it seem a whole lot, kind of quantifies it as really being a subjective thing.
I don't know personally, I am kind of like not, I don't know how to respond to that without actually really going back
Right.
and looking at it. So that's I would have to, that's not a question I think I can answer like right now.
Okay.
And the whole reason that we went to this new survey was because the other going through the standards was very confusing.
It was very confusing, and I believe this is more helpful to both us and Brian in evaluating his performance, his actual what he does day to day, not what the state's expectations and priorities are of a superintendent's behavior. Paul?
You said you thought 25, 26, and 30 directly applied to Standard 1, and that questions. So my question for Brian is, which questions did you think applied directly to Standard?
I did not have specific questions where.
I would say a lot of them we agreed on.
Yeah.
Those were specifically the ones where I said, I believe these apply to item 1. And he said, no, I'm pretty sure those are 4 and only 4.
So 25, 26, and
30 were the 3 that I had called out in my notes from before.
Yeah,
We're
I
going
don't think
through.
I was saying that it was 4 and only 4.
Yep.
It was the fact that I don't think it
4.
proved the point for number 1.
Or number 1.
Which again, it speaks to, I don't want to make the point for you, but I mean, in hindsight now, having done the process, I think the goal of PNN over the coming year is, if we like the overall thought, great. How can we align it so at the end, there's a quantitative process where we can tally and say, yes, Brian comes out, needs improvement, exemplary, proficient.
Ideally, last year, I literally took and assigned a number value to each of these and then would average it across the committee. And let's say I ended up with a 3.7 out of 5, then that directly correlated back to significant progress or whatever it happened to be. I would round up or round down depending on where I ended up in the decimal.
And I could print you off a weighted averages report from the
Yep.
survey, and it would do the same thing, but again, they're not aligned to the standards, so it's not helpful.
I'm mostly looking for feedback of whether you think this is an accurate representation to send to the state.
Yeah, you need more than feedback, you need a vote.
Yeah, I need a vote.
Vote on
well,
my
we will.
evaluation.
Yes.
Didn't, you also said that you felt like the standard one was related to the leadership team? Isn't that what you said in the beginning? That
Yes. So that was part of the conversation that we had, was that I don't believe in instructional leadership, that Brian is actively leading, again, that first grade teacher at an elementary school. He's leading the principal, who is then,
Right, right.
though there is some flow down of that responsibility, he's by and large more responsible for that principal
Right.
than he is for
Right.
that teacher.
Right, and I agree completely with that.
Paul?
I would say that the rubric is explicit about that he's responsible for the administrators and not the teachers, even in the exemplary category. Although it does mention students, it is supporting administrators in getting this down to students.
Yeah. This is true.
And I think this is a good picture of Brian. I mean, if we were to go around the table and say whether this is where he stands, I think this is a great representation of where we all feel he stands, or at least where I stand. I think this is perfect.
Paul?
So how many hours did you and Brian spend together trying to coalesce? No, seriously. How hard was it?
No, it
Time?
was about 45 minutes. I mean, we had both
On
gone
that,
through it ahead of
I think it
time.
was 45 minutes on standard 1. Yeah.
Hours?
It was
No,
we met
no,
for a
no.
couple hours. We were
No. We couldn't have been, because I literally did it while Owen was at Camp
Hour and a
Pierre.
half, yes.
Yeah, and he was only
Hour
here
and a
for an
half.
hour and a half, and we talked about other stuff during it. So,
we were late.
and I was late.
So an hour and a half.
So
Less.
I am not going to throw you under the bus, Narissa, but I think we need to rely on Brian's experience about where the questions fall. That's my own opinion.
Okay.
And the last thing I wanted to comment on is, could we do both next year? So we do the old system second, we do the first, what we did this year first, and then Brian would get the positive feedback, and yet you'd be better able to average the numbers at the end, like you did before.
Well, my
Because
hope would-
otherwise, PNN is going to have 27,000 meetings next year trying to do this. And I know Dina's excited about that. Me, not so much.
My hope and my suggestion was going to be that if PNN could just take this up and do this once and say, question whatever it is going to apply to these 2 items, and just make it hopefully nice and clear so that I can assign numbers and just average them out and have a nice solid answer for Brian in the future. Because I think even if we go and we do 2 systems, I believe the old system is so confusing that it still may not actually accurately portray what Brian's performance is.
So, so many thoughts. So, I mean, I think I can probably take the majority of the work away from PNN by putting this into a framework that matches the standard, not matches, that aligns to the standards, and bring it to PNN. So there'd be some work for PNN to discuss it, but I would bring to you something that looks very similar, but then just has a format that says, like Narissa was saying, are there 32 actual questions? This question applies to standard 1, 3, and 4. So that, whatever that scaled score that SurveyMonkey will give me, I plug in and it filters down and it gives that much that, and then it averages at the end and it's done. And then it's doing both of the things, Paul. It's not doing separate processes. It's just using the same process to get to the rating that the state needs. So I don't think it has to be a lot of work. Should come through the PNN, but I don't think that's more than she's so going to vote you chair. Payback, it's coming, Paul. It's coming.
Oh,
Touch the nose quick. So yeah, I don't think it has to be a lot of work for PNN, but I do think there needs to be something, back to your point, Deb, of what are we doing to bring some quantitative.
I want to get back to the point of literally assigning some numbers and go ahead, Dina.
I want to say, since I was part of PNN that first looked at this survey, and like I said to Brian prior to this meeting, when I first read this, I thought it was fabulous, and I still do. I think this is a good evaluation tool. However, I do think we do need to assign different standards to each of these, and I'm willing to look at that over the summer too, so we won't be meeting a million times, Paul, although I do like spending time with you. We do have a good time. Anyway.
It's been really nice.
Yes.
I just want to say, this is nice.
Anyway, I do think that needs to be done, because I agree with you, Narissa. I think trying to do both of those evaluations next year, we wouldn't gather any more information, any more useful information anyway. Getting directly to Narissa's question about the standards, I have to agree with Brian, and I think with Paul as well, that I would rate standard 1 as proficient, not exemplary. Not that you aren't doing a great job, but when I'm looking at this even quickly, your goal number 1, student learning goal, kind of encompasses a lot of what I think instructional leadership includes. And to me, that, we rated that goal significant progress, so I think that would be, should merit a proficient rating for standard number 1.
Or down. But I think, to everyone's point, and Paul, you talked about the rubric speaks specifically to my working with the leadership team, but when it uses words like empowers and supports and leads and sets and models and employs, there's certainly things like sets and models that I'm doing, that's my actions, but then there are also things that I would say, if I was exemplary in this category, then we would be having less discussions about certain areas that we want to see improved. Now, I would hope, even when we think we've arrived, we're still ready to improve more. And I don't think we're in an awful place. That's not what I'm saying. But I tend to like to see exemplary as truly set aside as
Examples for others to follow.
literally, and that's the way that DESE uses, that you would literally put this person on a pedestal to say, this is what you should be looking towards to be. And I think this year I was not that. My efforts, if it was, A for effort, but if it's about being a leader, which that's the piece about this survey that I like, it's not just about outputs and a score, it's about assessing me as a leader. A leader yields results. Again, I can't believe I'm on this side of the argument, but that's okay, this is fun.
Any other input from the committee? Can I just go down the line and get an opinion from each person on standard 1 and where he should be, just so that we can come to a consensus on that and then vote this through, hopefully? And I'm going to skip Erin because she hasn't been here long enough to. Yes, Paul?
Proficient.
Proficient? Okay.
Proficient.
Paul?
All right.
Proficient.
Proficient.
After what Brian just said, proficient.
We don't even need to go any farther, but you can if you want.
Just put somewhere in the minutes that Brian just convinced the committee to move from exemplary to proficient.
You didn't
Right.
have to convince me.
Yeah. It's been a long time, Dina.
No, but I will say,
No.
effort, it doesn't, that's not reflected here, but yes.
That was awesome.
Good line.
Hey, you wanted more dialogue between
we got
committee members
honest
and
dialogue. This is
superintendent. You
awesome.
got it.
Get our viewership up. Get the ratings up,
This ought to do it.
sadly.
All right. So that said, I am looking at a summative evaluation that reflects Standard 1 of instructional leadership as proficient, Standard 2 management and operations as proficient, Standard 3 family and community engagement as exemplary, Standard 4 professional culture as proficient, and the overall evaluation as proficient. Can I get a motion to approve the evaluation of the superintendent of schools for the 2018-2019 school year as presented and discussed?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I just want to add, I do wholeheartedly believe that you are marked correctly for family and community engagement. Nobody could have done more than what you did this year, not only with family engagement and within the district, but I do think that your work at the state level has put Triton on the map, and Narissa's work as well, but since this is your evaluation, has put Triton on the map as leaders in trying to get change for education reform, and I think that's a great thing. Kudos to you.
Depends on who you talk
I-
to. Sometimes he's referred to as a troublemaker.
That's right. Yeah.
That's okay, too. That's okay,
Tag
too.
I'm happy to wear.
I would also like to add that I've worked with, I believe it's 8 different superintendents, and your budget presentation was by far the easiest to follow and the most comprehensive.
Talk a little louder.
Sorry, your budget
Say it one more
presentation,
time.
yeah, your budget presentation was by far the easiest to follow and the most comprehensive.
All right. And could I ask PNN, when you take this back up, there are a few suggestions that were included in the comments at the end. If you could just take those up as well. I know some of them, Brian said, are the logistics, like being able to pause the survey in the
Yep.
middle and take it back up, and that's just a SurveyMonkey setting.
I believe there are settings I can dig deep into that, I think it was Linda who did the whole thing and then it froze and lost it and had to do it twice. So there are certainly ways that it'll save it and you can come back to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, but if we can just take those up and whoever's sharing, and look at those comments as well, that'd be great, just in case it needs to be adjusted for next year.
And if I can just say thank you for the time. I saw the timer, so I know how much time you spent on it through SurveyMonkey. But just the thoughtful feedback and comments. This is by far the most helpful evaluation to get constructive criticism. Thank you for those that went thoughtfully through the questions, and it wasn't just Brian's awesome, but there's actually thoughtful comments and constructive criticism. So it's very helpful. So thank you for that.
Can I ask one other thing? You said that there was another district that was potentially.
Tri-Town?
Yeah, so
Scott Morrison also did the same. We were just pinging back and forth about how the public discussion went. I believe his was last week, so I have to follow up with him.
could we maybe have that discussion in August? Just to see what their experience was, and, maybe between even our two committees, maybe we can come up with something that is a little bit more
Yeah,
useful.
we basically followed the same process where it was the chair and the superintendent who tried to make sense to fit into the rubric. So my guess is they probably had something similar as far
Right.
as the discussion.
But that's what I mean. It would be good to
Yeah.
get that feedback, too. So maybe between the two committees, we can format something that really makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Yep. Absolutely.
Oh, I didn't have a formal vote. I apologize. All right, all in favor? All right. Good. What, that's 7-4, 1 abstain. All right.
Who abstained? I didn't-
Erin, because she's.
Oh, yeah, that's
she
right.
couldn't-
She doesn't like me.
Moving on to B, representative to the collaboratives, NEC and Crest Board of Directors.
Is it though? Is it? Anyone else wants to be nominated?
No thanks.
Okay, just checking.
Do you want to give background? I think we all know the background on this.
I mean, unless you want to hear. I represent you on the North Shore Education Consortium in Crest. What are the numbers? We currently have students at both, more at North Shore than Crest. We get member rates by maintaining membership. So it's still, the last analysis, it's still worth my time and effort to sit on both boards. And more, there are several, Ipswich, Tri-Town, Masco, Triton, Pentucket's thinking about doing dual membership, so.
Can I get a motion to appoint Superintendent Brian Forget as the Triton representative to the North Shore Education Consortium Board of Directors effective July 1, 2019?
I'll make that motion. Happily.
Seconded.
Seconded. Any discussion? Paul?
I was just going to say, I think it's important because one of the issues that Senator Tarr raised the other night was that they're going to be drilling down on that.
Absolutely.
Which, can I just add
Yeah.
to that, too? For those who don't know, school committee members can sit on these boards, but I think as Brian has pointed out before, it's mostly now superintendents. So I think that that's probably the way this is headed. And given the fact that as Senator Tarr said, they're going to be looking at these or this.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I think having our superintendent there is the right person to represent us.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? And can I get a motion to appoint Superintendent Brian Forget as the Triton representative to the Crest Collaborative Board of Directors effective July 1, 2019, please?
I'll make that motion.
Seconded.
All? Any discussion? All in favor? All right, you have a unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Welcome. Moving on to item C, authorizing the treasurer to borrow. Michelle, are you?
Sure. This is just an annual authorization that we ask of the school committee to borrow if the need should arise, if we have a shortfall in revenues to cover our expenses at any particular time throughout the year. We have not actually used this for at least since I've been here for 3 years. I don't know if we've had to use that in the past, but it is an annual authorization, which it's just really good to have in place should we need a short-term borrowing to meet our cash flow needs.
Can I get a motion to authorize the district treasurer with the approval of the chairperson of the school committee to borrow money from time to time in anticipation of the revenue for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2019, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 17, please?
So moved.
Second it.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor? It's unanimous. And back to Michelle, I believe, for school meal prices 2019-2020.
Yes. So we are proposing that we implement a price increase in our school meals for the upcoming school year, the 1920 school year. We last raised prices 2 years ago for the 17-18 school year by 10% across the board. Every year we have to take a look at our lunch prices to make sure we meet the paid lunch equity formula, which basically says that we're not giving things away for free, and that the government is reimbursing us for the free meals. And so we do need to increase certain prices by a few cents here and there. So we took a good look at, rather than just increasing them by 10 or 15 cents across the board, we actually looked at each category and surveyed the areas. And we did, proposing that the price increases are a little bit varied across the board, ranging from no increase at breakfast for kindergarten through 8th grade. That will remain at $1.75 a meal. Breakfast at the high school, we are proposing that we raise to $2 per meal. It's currently at $1.75, so a 25-cent price increase. Lunch at kindergarten through 8th grade is proposed to be at $2.90 a meal, a 5-cent increase. Lunch at the high school, where they actually receive larger portions, proposed to be $3.15, also a 5-cent increase. An extra lunch, if a student gets a additional burger, additional slice of pizza, we're proposing to raise that to $2, which is an increase of 25 cents. An adult lunch, proposing it to the price of $4 per lunch, an increase of 15 cents, and still you cannot get a lunch anywhere for $4 for an adult around here, so it's quite a bargain. And an extra adult lunch if an adult decides to get a second lunch for $2.25, still can't beat that price. So that's an increase of 25 cents. So we're proposing these new increases. We believe that these increases will raise our income about $10,000. We're currently projecting a deficit of about $40,000 for this year that we just are just closing out. But we also have the projected losses due to equipment repairs and a 1-year trial of free breakfast program that we had at Salisbury School, which was not cost effective. We're supposed to have more free students receiving that breakfast program. We actually received less free students receiving breakfast in that program, so it didn't make sense any longer. So we are proposing those price increases, and then the second piece of this proposal is we would like to put a minimum of $35 for online transactions for my school bucks. Currently, we pay $1.95 per transaction, so if a family goes online, makes a $10 payment, we're paying $1.95, absorbing that. So our costs last year were approximately $25,000 for those online fees. So if we raise the minimum online transaction to $35, we look to save quite a bit of money and reduce our loss a little bit more. So families can still send in money, they can send in cash, they can send in checks, not a problem, if they want to do a payment less than $35, but we'd like to increase that minimum online transaction fee.
Michelle, do you need a separate vote for that increase of the transaction?
I don't believe so. We did them the same 2 years ago. We had raised it to $10 2 years ago.
Can I get a motion to approve the meal, breakfast, and lunch prices as presented effective September 3rd, 2019?
So moved?
Second it.
Any discussion? Question? Yeah?
We had a 40,000 deficit for the food and a $25,000 deficit for the online transactions, or is that?
No, the online transaction fee is included in that $40,000 deficit. So if we didn't have that, we'd only have a $15,000 deficit.
Tina?
But we don't want to completely get rid of those fees because then parents would be a little hesitant to pay online.
How much of that deficit is because people didn't pay their food bill?
That's actually not factored into that figure. That's about an additional $2,000 right now. And that's not too bad. And that was as of last week. We've actually been collecting, getting out June 14th. We've been actively collecting, and Brian's received a number of emails from families that I'm trying to collect from. All of a sudden, they find the need to copy Brian on these emails.
They're paying.
They think he doesn't know what's going on. But yeah, no, we've actively been collecting, so we're hoping that $2,000 is much less, which would be great.
Michelle, why, is there a reason why we are not increasing the price on breakfast for K through 8? Does it have to do with serving size again, or?
It does. The serving size at K through 8 is substantially smaller than the breakfast at the high school. So we figured that they should have a different price level as they do for lunches.
The second question is, I know before we were going to absorb the $1.95 transaction fee to encourage people to use that. Should we be putting that burden on parents now? I mean, would there be enough of a cost savings? I get the feeling you've had this discussion.
Who are you asking?
Yeah. It's really a gamble, and there's no real correct answer. I mean, I pay my online fees to Masconomet when I make my lunch deposits, and I do pay that $1.95 fee. It's convenience.
Right.
It's rather than my son losing a check on the way to school. But I know that all families can't afford that as well, so we want to encourage the online payments. So that's why when it was originally implemented, we absorbed that fee. But we also absorb that fee, not to go off on a tangent, but we absorb that fee for all of our online collections.
Okay, and
Kids Club,
that was the next question.
tuitions, athletics. So it's a substantial cost when you add them all together.
Exactly. So is there a way to maybe look at that, and if we have to do a sliding scale for transaction forgiveness or whatever, for those who can't or that it's difficult for? Because I would hate to see if we are going to charge this and say we want $35 minimum, that all of a sudden we start to see more people sending in cash or checks, and we're back to square one that we were before we implemented this.
Right.
So
to take Michelle off the hook for defending nicely,
No, it's
you
tough.
play debate and you get to debate the other person's. So this was, this went back to my time as business manager, assistant superintendent, and my belief is that it gets more people to pay online. So you just said, if that $1.95 transaction fee and that implication of the way it ties into the $35 minimum, the $35 minimum will likely prompt some people to send in cash. Putting the $1.95 fee back on, I think, would prompt more people to do cash and check. So the whole motivation wasn't that we were saving a ton of money. It was that, and I think an auditor and Michelle would agree, the less cash and checks
like
we have
cash,
floating
yeah.
around, that's just bad for business. It gets, people can make claims even when it's nothing fraudulent happening. So the whole motivation to do the online fee or the online waive the fee was so that it encourages people to go in, use a credit card, and get us the cash and spend less time chasing on collections.
I totally understand that, but given the fact that we just came through another budget, that we were not able to support things that I certainly think we need, and that I'm sure you all could come up with your own list that we think we need. And if we are spending approximately $25,000 just in transaction fees for this alone, correct, Michelle?
Correct.
So what would you estimate, or do you have any idea what our total cost would be for paying these fees?
The fees are structured differently for the other programs, but I would guesstimate in the ballpark of $45,000 to $50,000 in total, including this.
Including this, so,
So it's probably double.
yeah, so that's a good chunk of money that,
But again, so the thought is, if we implement the minimum fee, the minimum charge, it would.
We'll be paying less fees because the families won't be making a $10 and a $20 deposit
We
into
pay
the loan.
$1.95
yeah, because
for
they'll
everything.
they'll have
Right.
to do it
$5,
less
$10.
frequently.
Larger,
I get
right.
that.
So if we were to waive the dollar, if we were to go back to charging the parents the
Yep.
$1.95, their $35 minimum is moot at that point. Did you say this already? How much do you think we would save by implementing the $35? Half, I mean, roughly? No, because it's a per transaction. So the $35 is, if you wanted to put 20 bucks on.
Last year, we had 10,700 payments less than $35 for a total of $15,600 in fees.
Right, so that.
So it would take more than half of that cost.
25 goes down to 10.
Yes.
Appreciate the thought that went into that.
No, and I think that, I'm proposing this change at this time, and Lucinda and I talk about this frequently, and we wrap Ryan into that conversation. But I do think it's something that we should probably look into and keep looking into and keep reviewing it and see what the costs are. And I've tried to get the credit card fees percentages down. They're not really negotiating, so it's something to keep our eyes on in the future.
Is there a way to tie the user fees that you're using into pulling from this account too, so that if somebody knows that they're going to spend like a $50 user fee and put money into the kid's account, that it would be one cost?
Unfortunately, no. It is the same program, but it's set up differently. Their meal program has the $1.95 fee, and their credit cards has 3.75% transaction fee, and it's considered separate on their ends.
Everything else, we could do school store, we could do online fees, athletics, everything could be one forever.
Right.
Food services. would be
Always separate. Yeah.
I just have a couple of questions. Is My School Bucks the only game in town?
It is not, but it definitely has the market
Does,
for
okay.
the most part in Massachusetts.
And could somebody else here that is still paying for their child through school chime in? But I would have sworn that when I make a credit card purchase for kids' meals, that we get charged as well.
I'd have to look.
Yeah, if you could look into that, please.
I think we do.
Let me know.
I have it going automatic.
I have an automatic too, but I don't think we do.
You don't know.
I would be shocked if it is, because it's all this, even as a staff, so anything going in through My School Bucks, it's set up. And back to, I think you asked the question, Dean, about the kind of the sliding scale. If you have a certain income level, it's just the system is applying the fee or it's not. There's no, so the system isn't set up to be able to charge you a fee and me not a fee. So I'd
Okay.
be shocked if you were paying that for PJ.
Okay,
But double check.
will do.
Definitely.
Ina, did you have a question? No, that was it. Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Good unanimous vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should know, this is like the thing that pains Lucinda the most. Because we always say, let's just round up, right? Let's not do this every up, just round it up. But there is lots of data to show that every little nickel impacts participation. So
I tried to
it's a
get her
tough
to
balance.
increase the nickels to dimes, and it just wasn't happening. So I said, okay, we'll leave it where it is.
All right, subcommittee reports and action items, policy and advocacy. You are up first.
Excellent. Okay, we had a meeting tonight, and we had you can't hear me?
I was wondering if Paul can hear you because he was almost
Trying.
looking like, okay.
Is it this way, Paul? We had a meeting this evening at 5:30, and over the last few months, we've been working with Narissa, sending emails to different districts that had similar issues as we did with the Promise Act, and going to the meetings where the legislators were talking. Narissa, again, has put together a list, I think it was Paul and Narissa, put together a list of more districts that are in the same position as we are, but we have probably more accurate numbers than what we had previously. So we're going to divide and conquer by Paul, sending out emails and calling the MTA, Erin trying to go after selectmen, and myself with school committee members trying to get as many of these different groups to contact their state legislators as possible to try and get them to understand that these numbers are not the numbers that they expect. I don't know if you have something more. So just so that you know, we'll be sending out more emails and trying to advocate for other districts to contact their legislators. Because we don't have a lot of policies that we'll be reviewing, so we're going to switch to a lot of advocacy. We're also going to look in future months of extending or expanding on the Student of the Month, maybe having one Teacher of the Year. We're in the discussion now whether it's students or just teachers that would nominate teachers. And maybe twice a year having a volunteer of the, expanding it to the volunteers. I think that's all that we had. You have anything, Paul? No?
Covers the bases.
Yeah.
Does cover the base.
So if anybody has any questions on that.
You guys are meeting the 11th of September?
Yeah, we meet the Wednesday of the school committee before the school committee because it's more convenient for some members.
Linda was voted the chair again, so she'll continue to chair that subcommittee.
Yes.
Lucky Linda. All right, moving on to finance.
Dina wanted to,
In the minutes from June 19th, under FY '20 budget discussion, Michelle shared with the subcommittee the increasing special education tuition costs for next year are approximately $320,000 over what was budgeted for. Can we discuss that?
Yes, we have had a lot of activity in the special education outplacements since the budget was set back in March, or since the budget was put together in January. We've had, I believe it was one student that was quite costly. It was a foster student that added to that. And a lot of those, that total of the 320,000 includes a lot of guesstimates at this point. So it's not a solid number. We're hoping that it comes in a little bit less, and that's why I'm not quite panicking yet. But certainly we do not have any excess funds. A little bit, just a little. We certainly do not have excess funds at this time, so just want to go into the year very cautiously. And I know with the new fiscal year, everyone's looking at, we can finally afford projects, we can do this, we can spend our budget, and I'm just very cautious about this at this time of year.
So how many students are we talking about that this number involves?
Few, but just as a point of reference, so Michelle mentioned a student who formerly a resident, formerly attended, is currently in DCF custody, because of being in DCF custody, the last address was within the district. It's a cost share, and our cost is about $172,000. So we're splitting that. So there was a fight initially, it would all be our cost, but because it's DCF, it's a residential program, obviously, for $350,000 a year. DCF plays the residential portion, we pay the academic portion. So that one student alone,
It's half
right
of
off the
that.
radar, no question, no team meeting, just a
Here it is,
fight.
here's
I
your
mean,
bill.
They fought that for a little
Yes.
bit. But again, that's not about the student and the need, that's about the funding mechanism is broken, so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's 4 or 5 students
I was
that
going to
are in
say,
this state
my
of flux.
guesstimate is 5 to 6, yeah. I don't know off the top of my head exact.
Is that it, Dina? Was that
Yep.
your own question? Yeah, we did have our last meeting of the current school year, and Michelle noted we did not have to borrow from excess and deficiency. It was close, really
Don't know the
close.
heart attack that I had yesterday when payroll posted improperly, and I thought we were in deficit. But we're good this morning. I went to bed and we're good this morning.
That's good, glad to hear it. So that was one thing. And the other thing of note is that the $120,000 that was saved from healthcare will go into the OPEB line, as you see in the minutes there. And if we need to move it, we can move it, but it's going to go into OPEB. And our
Yes.
next meeting is the end of August.
Does that amount of money for the special education include transportation?
Yes.
Relevant to P&A. Any further discussions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Paul?
Does that sort of DCF dynamic take place often?
Not to that extent, usually.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't happen often. I feel like it's happening, obviously, routinely around the state. It tends to be more moving within the school year. So not as much as a DCF custody case, but someone who just moves across towns and all of a sudden becomes our financial responsibility. So there are students, generally a student in a residential placement, may have never been seen by any town, right? So never been seen by the schools wherever the parents lived. So if that student, if that family moves, it instantly becomes our responsibility. There's a law in the books that says if the student's in a collaborative program, that there's an April 15th. If it's past April 15th, we get an extra year. So if a student moved out of the district on June 1st and was a high cost in a private placement, we have to cover that for one more year. And that law is set up so that we're done with our budget process by April 15th, so we've already budgeted for it. So in all fairness, we keep the student. Same on the incoming. There's a law in the books that law that's on the books says unless they're in a collaborative placement, there was a time when collaborative placements were 50, 60, 70% of a private placement. That's not the case anymore. As you know, sitting on 2 collaborative boards, we're hiring the same people, the same services. It's almost an equivalent cost. Being a member, then there's some discount member rate. But there's some need to change that within the law. So does it happen to us routinely? No. I mean, we had a student that choiced into Newburyport. Remember when it fell off, this windfall of $300,000? So it happens not on a daily or yearly basis, but it's happening on a routine basis to cities and towns across the Commonwealth. It's just who's getting hit.
But I mean, the DCF, that whole issue is a legal issue as opposed to an IEP and a SPED, isn't it?
So that's purely based upon financial responsibility. So same with school choice. If it's a family choices to a member community or a local community, they become a resident student, so they have programmatic responsibility per an IEP. They are then billing us back through choice. So if we place a student, we maintain the programmatic responsibility because we're placing a student and the financial responsibility. So through DCF, it has everything to do with custody. Once a student gets placed in DCF custody, there's no local control anymore, obviously for the family or for us. So it's last known residence, it's well known in this case. So we just get the financial responsibility. I'm sorry, the programmatic responsibility.
And so I'm just raising this because it seems to me that this is like, we spoke with Senator Tarr the other night about placements that are heavily medical, and my feeling as well as Dina's that that really should be borne better by the state. I think even though DCF is not a big component or much of a component for our district at all, I think that's something that should be raised with Senator Tarr as well, because that's not an IEP decision, it's not a SPED placement decision, it's not a parent's pushback, it's the system, the state making a placement. And I think if we could get the state to bear the bigger cost of that somehow and let us still share the educational side, I think that would be important.
And I would take that a step further. Senator Tarr referenced the North Shore Unified District, which was actually Rob Lebo put the PowerPoint together, but that was our North Shore Roundtable that created that hypothetical district, all of our combined data. And part of the discussion, I mean, was solely and almost exclusively around special education. But part of the things that we suggested with Lewis and Diaz in the room was that the state, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but somewhat seriously, that the state, anytime a student is placed out, they become the state's responsibility. Because the state's laws and federal laws, and again, when a student is justified, I don't want this to sound like we don't want what's right for the student, but it's firmly backing the parent. And the parent can work a system when we don't believe it's a correct placement. But as soon as the parent works into that process and gets an advocate and an attorney and shows up at the BSEA, we're lost. So we make the decision to either spend the legal money and fight it, or just settle. So with all of those cases, the state doesn't understand the impact of the laws they have on the books. So that, we said it tongue in cheek, but it led to a really powerful discussion about the state. Senators literally have no comprehension of the way special education works, and clearly, and this is not to their discredit, it's not their world, clearly the impact of mental health in the work that we do every day. And I would say, to your point, Paul, mental health is health. It's a medical issue. That was loaded.
All right. So I think that was it. That was finance subcommittee, all wrapped up in a bow. And Deb is staying chair of finance subcommittee. Personnel and negotiations.
We have not met, we haven't had a need to.
Sorry, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I forgot we have to go back and vote the minutes.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Forgot about that. Can I get a motion to receive and file the treasurer's report for April 2019 as recommended by the finance subcommittee at its meeting at May 22nd, 2019?
I will move that.
Okay. All in favor? All right, and can I get a motion to receive and file the treasurer's report for May 2019 as recommended by the finance subcommittee at its meeting on June 19th, 2019?
Yes.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. All right, thank you. Sorry about that, Dina.
That's okay. PNN has not needed to meet. We have new members. Maureen will be joining Paul and I. So we'll have to set a date and a time to meet, I'm sure not until September. Not anticipating anything coming up for PNN to deal
Fine if
with,
you wanna
so.
meet.
Paul
I think you
doesn't-
voted Paul as the chair.
Paul-
That's what I heard. I don't know.
That's what I heard.
Doesn't know it yet.
We'll take care of it.
Meetings will be short.
All right, and I'll just note that you have correspondence in your packet between NIASC and Principal Daw. Oh, what? Did I miss?
What we talked about was the minutes,
We pulled the minutes.
but you just moved
Oh, did I?
the treasurer's report.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. I
But she
apologize.
did, when she made that motion, she did pull B. I think she did it right.
Pulled the
I
whole
pulled
thing.
B.
She pulled the whole thing.
No, she pulled the whole.
I should have.
Oh, she did,
I should
all
have.
of B,
All of B.
right. So the reports, oh, so yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you're right. I just grabbed the wrong set of things. So
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the
there you go.
June 19th meeting.
I'll second it.
Wait, June 19th? Yeah. Okay, all right. So that's the second one. Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? All right, my apologies for that. All right, now really back to
But-
Dina.
But then all of these too.
I think you can amend, what you really wanted to pull was the minutes.
Right, that was the only thing I
I
wanted to.
think we can
yeah.
amend the original pull to item 4.
Just the minutes.
Yeah. BA. Yeah. I think we're covered. It's a consent agenda anyway, so, all right. And just noting the correspondence that's in your packet between NIASC and Principal Daw, setting the date for the collaborative conference visit. Happy summer, everybody. Our next regular meeting is August 21st, 2019 in the high school library at 7 p.m. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Thank you very much.